Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'd like to pay tribute to the Honourable Member for South Shields, who I know has done a huge amount of work in this area over a number of years and brings a huge amount of experience to many of the points that she's raised. And this report does actually cover not just the DWP, but it reflects on the DC, HLG, Treasury and DEXU, but here I will be speaking predominantly from the perspective of the DWP. And at this stage it is only an interim report, and we are committed to considering very carefully his views and opinions. Now, I recognise that honourable members would now expect me to disagree with the majority of the report as it stands, and there are certainly things that we don't agree with, but I do support the important role of the UN Special Rapporteur on extreme poverty and human rights. Myself, the former Secretary of State, other departmental ministers, our respective teams were fully engaged with the process. We met with him, we supported the visits and the engagement throughout that process, and as I said, we will give very serious considerations to the views and opinions that he's brought forward. And I, as a minister, I'm not precious. Government should be challenged. We should be held to account, whether that's the UN Rapporteur, whether that's stakeholders, or the fantastic work that the various select committees do. All governments of all political persuasions, since the dawn of time, have had challenging reports. It's rare that we get a report that says, fantastic, you are single-handedly doing everything perfectly right. And it's an important part of our democratic process. And even those most challenging and most critical reports do ultimately shape future decisions. I won't do too many because I've got a lot to do, but yes.
I thank the Minister for giving way. I'm a little confused because the Prime Minister and the Secretary of State have both said they dismiss these findings and do not agree with the report. Has there been a change of thinking between their comments and the Minister coming to the dispatch box today?
Well, what I'm saying is we will consider them seriously. We obviously don't agree. We don't agree with all of them, but there are important views and opinions that he has highlighted that rightly we should be looking to respond to. One challenge I will have back to him ahead of his final report is that two of the visits to Newcastle and also the visit to Clacton, where he had the opportunity to meet with frontline staff and volunteers. And at the recent Women and Equalities question, the Honourable Member for Clacton expressed a huge amount of disappointment from those frontline staff and volunteers who felt that their work, their fantastic work that they do, wasn't recognised. It had just one line, and I do hope that in the future report it's right to hold the government and us, the minister's, feet to the coals. But I think we would all recognise that there are people who do a fantastic job. That's both the paid formal staff and the volunteers across, and I do hope he would reflect on that. And as we consider his views and findings, we must remember that it is a snapshot. On many of the issues raised, we are rightly already taking action, acknowledging that there were issues and that they needed to be dealt with, and that's either through the additional money secured in recent budgets or our ongoing and crucial work with stakeholders with their particular expertise. And as I said, whilst this covers many departments, I will focus on where the DWP has the lion's share of the involvement. Now, understandably, UC was a significant part of both the report and the speech that we've just heard. And to be absolutely clear, this was never a financial thing. We are looking to spend an additional £2 billion compared to the legacy benefits, rightly so. UC offers the opportunity for personalised tailored support, dealing with housing, training, childcare, and giving the claimants who are in a position to seek work at an additional 50% more time to find work. And actually, if you visit the job centres, and whilst there are still challenges and there is much more work to do, the actual frontline staff do recognise that UC is significantly better than the complex legacy benefits, which were 6 benefits across 3 agencies, HMRC, DWP, local authorities. You frankly had to be a nuclear physicist to navigate them. We all know from our own constituency casework how complex it was to unravel the situation. I'll do one last one.
Sure. Just to say that in my constituency office, I'm just about 100 yards from the Social Security office, as close as that. I've had numerous people coming out of the Social Security office, coming into my office looking for advice, distressed. And I think, Minister, and I've written to your department, maybe not to you directly, but to your department, just to outline some of the things that we feel should be changes that should be made. And I'm just asking the Minister, in light of those things, maybe there needs to be more done in the Social Security office to address the issues early on.
I thank the Honourable Member for Stratford, and I'm coming to those. It dealt with the fact that there was, for some, an effective 90% tax rate, the well-documented 16, 24 and 30-hour cliff edges, which were significant barriers for people, and the fact that it was so confusing and complex that we believe £2.4 billion worth of claims went untaken each year across 700,000 claimants, some of the most vulnerable people. My role within DWP is to represent vulnerable people going through the benefit system, and it was often those who were missing out on money because simply they were unaware that they were entitled to the support that we all rightly wanted them to have. Let me make a little bit of progress, and I might, if I've got time, because I'm conscious the person who secured this debate has raised some important questions. I want to try and cover as much as I can in the limited time. If I can, I'll come to you. There has already been much-needed improvements, partly through the additional £4.5 billion cash boost that's been secured over the recent budgets, the changes to advance payments, particularly to actually make it part of the discussion at the initial conversation, changing the repayments from 6 months to 12 months to 16 months, and at the rate that they're done. That's something we will continue to review. The additional non-repayable 2 weeks housing benefit worth up to £237, and the recent announcement for an additional 2 weeks of ESA, GSA or income support worth up to £200. We scrapped the 7 days waiting, the alternative payments in terms of direct to landlords on housing or more frequent payments where we feel that will help. The additional £1,000 extra work allowance worth £630, that alone was £1.7 billion. The 12-month exemptions from the minimum income floor for the self-employed, and the increases for the severe disability premium from £158 to £326. However, there are areas where we still need to do further work, and in the speech for the talk about the digital by default, and I think we do need to look at that. We do have in place alternatives, but I think we also need to be more proactive in recognising those who would need that support. We've got to identify vulnerable claimants, and I think it was a major step to put in place a formal arrangement, something I had championed, with the citizens' advice. They will remain independent of us, they are widely respected, and they are best placed to give support, particularly to vulnerable claimants, not just with the digital side, if that's needed, but the general support as they navigate the benefits that they should be entitled to. And building on that, we have to make sure that stakeholders are absolutely key and at the heart of everything we do in terms of training of our frontline staff and providing support for claimants. So, for example, just before Christmas, the month before Christmas, I was working very closely with Women's Aid, Refuge and Mankind, meeting 3 and 4 times so that they could do a root and branch review of the training that we do to help identify potential victims of domestic abuse, that they could update our training manuals and guidance, that they could feed in the feedback they get from their supporters, and then look at the best ways that we can identify potential victims, refer them to the maximum number of local and national support organisations, and to work on the level of support that we can offer. And that is a principle that I would like to see formalised. So it's not just because it's a topical issue now, it's something that's a given going forward, and then looking to do that in many areas. Now, there was lots said about in terms of poverty measures, and what is the reality out there. And what we do know is there is 1 million fewer people in absolute poverty, which is a record low, which is 300,000 fewer children. On the different measures of relative, absolute, before and after housing, all are no higher than 2010 and 3 are now lower. And the average income of the poorest fifth in society under our government has increased by £400 in real terms. I'll do one more.
The Minister for giving way. Does he agree with Professor Alston's assessment that because the government uses 4 different measures of poverty, they can essentially say what they want about these figures? The reality is there's 14 million people living in poverty in the UK.
Well, the Honourable Member's just used one of those stats. And actually, we recognise that, and this cross-party work on looking at alternatives, and we are very interested to see if there's a way we can find statistics that we can all agree in. So I think actually that's one area we all do agree in. And the richest fifth are £800 less well off under this government. So we are targeting the support rightly at those that are most in need. And household incomes have never been higher. And income inequality has fallen, having risen under the last Labour government. Now, also, many people referred to food banks. Now, food affordability, the ability to afford a meal, has almost halved in the last 5 years, down to 5.4%, which is 2.5% lower than the EU average. There is still more to do in that area, which is why I am committed to working a lot closer with the food bank network in this country, because for a variety of reasons, some people may be going to food banks who should be getting formal support, and I want to make it as easy as possible to identify, to refer, and get them back into the system so they can get their full support. One of the honourable members shaking hand, I do not understand why anybody would not want to do everything within their power to identify vulnerable people within society and give them the support that we want to do. And going to the very heart of the question that was raised by the honourable member was, is there a will from the government? That absolutely is, from myself, from the government, right through. We are going to keep on working with all of the stakeholders, the partnership organisations, to make sure that those in most need in society get the support that they should do. We are also looking in the areas of homelessness. Rightly, we've put an additional £1.2 billion, building on the principles of duty to refer. And we have some exciting pilots, the Newcastle Trailblazer, partnership working led by Crisis, that have had some really, really positive findings. And the Housing First initiatives in Manchester, Liverpool and the West Midlands. Again, on the principles, identifying, referring and support. Exciting developments from those pilots, and those will go to the very heart of future rolled-out support. And the key for me, with my own individual role within the Parliament, is really sharpening up the tailored support, whether that's with care leavers, ex-offenders, the parental conflict programme, making sure those who need that extra support that many of us in our lives were able to take for granted, is then a given for all people to unlock everybody's potential. And some of the areas that I felt were missing from the report was also looking at education and attainment to unlock people's potential. I went to school, bottom of the league tables, two of my best friends went to prison. And actually, it is absolutely key, if we can, regardless of people's background, make sure that we give them the maximum opportunity to succeed. And I wholeheartedly support the significant improvements that we are making in education. Yes.
Thank the Minister for giving way. As a former head teacher, I talk to a lot of my former colleagues, and many of them, of a morning, are washing children's clothes, giving them breakfast, having to give them extra lunch because they're starving. Does the Minister agree with me that this is totally unnecessary and inappropriate if we were caring for the most vulnerable in our society?
That's why it's absolutely right that we have targeted support at the poorest in society, which was why the poorest fifth are now £400 in real terms better off than they were under the Labour government, and we will continue to do that work. It is why we have prioritised, by having sound financial management and a strong growing economy, we've been able to deliver record employment in every single region of the country. That wages are rising the fastest in a decade. We've introduced the national living wage, the income tax threshold changes, the UC childcare up to 85%, worth up to £15,000 to parents with 2 or more children, the doubling of free childcare. These are all priorities for this government, because we recognise, regardless of background, everybody should be supported. Everybody has their own, treating them as an individual in a simplified system that can give that tailored and personalised support, so regardless of their own unique challenges and opportunities, that we can unlock their potential. This, as I've said, is that many of those findings and opinions are ones that we have to take seriously. We are doing a huge amount of work, and we will continue to do it. And I thank the honourable member for raising this very important